Okay, hello, and welcome back to another edition of Milkshakes, Markets, and Madness. This is a show where we talk about the financial markets, we talk about the madness surrounding those financial markets, and we do it through the lens of the dollar milkshake theory, which is a framework for how the monetary system works, especially in some kind of a maddening scenario. And this week, we're going to talk about chaos versus control and whether or not there's somebody actually in control of all this, or if we're going to just have a bunch of chaos, or whether maybe things will just be okay. But that's kind of what I thought we would talk about this week. Before we get into that, wanted to just go over some quick highlights. Last week, it was actually a pretty big week in the markets. Things are starting to get a little bit maddening, as I'm sure most of you are aware. The big thing of the week was the non-farm payrolls that came out on Friday. Now, they missed expectations, which initially was greeted with happiness because if things continue to deteriorate, then that's a signal that the Fed is going to cut rates, and the market wants the Fed to cut rates. And so initially, risk assets, equities tended to, and gold all jumped on the news. But once you got past the headline and you actually started looking underneath the hood of the poll report, we saw that hourly earnings actually went up, which would signal that maybe inflation is not quite under control. And then also the unemployment went down, which means things are still going pretty well. So why would the Fed need to cut rates if unemployment's going down? The revisions, however, came in and they revised last month's down again. But in any case, as we went through the morning and through the day, markets sold off pretty hard, and they finished the week one of the worst weeks of the year. Equities were down anywhere from 3 to 6%. At least the major indexes. Some things were down much more than that. Nvidia had a really bad week. Tesla had a really bad week. But anyway, gold was pretty flat. It was down about 1%. It closed back below 2,500, which is kind of a psychological level. The week before, it had closed above 2,500, which was kind of a important milestone. Silver had a down week, which was down about 3%, closed back below 28. Oil had a very hard week, down almost 10%. I think it closed the week down 8%. And, this is a trade that has confounded people for a long time now. And many people thought oil should be, and energy in general should be much, much higher, but it just isn't. And, we've got oil in below 70, and I think it closed around 67 or 68 on the week. And, as a result of the sell-offs on Friday, the VIX jumped back above 20. So, we're starting to kind of feel those same types of markets that we saw at the end of July and into early August. And so, we're not totally surprised by that. I know for many of you that have been watching, we were expecting the volatility at the end of July. We got it. We were expecting a little bit of a bounce. We got a bigger bounce than we expected, but we also were expecting it to roll back over. And this week kind of saw that. Back in, I think it was June, I sent out this tweet that just kind of showed a potential path of how I thought kind of the rest of the year and into the next couple of years could play out. And I sent out this chart. And at the time, we were below the 1. I said, I thought we might rally up into number 1. And that turned out to be the high in July. And then I thought we would get a fairly hard and fast pullback. We got that. That was number 2. We got the rally into number 3. And now we've kind of rolled over a little bit, and we're kind of we're probably about where that 4 is on this chart. And so I think we still have some more downside over the next week or so, probably into the Fed meeting. Perhaps at the Fed meeting, we will be back down around the levels we were at the beginning of August, maybe even a little bit lower. After that, I would expect us to get a bounce. And then really, we got to kind of see what transpires heading up into the election. Maybe we'll get a buying opportunity here in the next couple of weeks in risk assets, but it's also possible we'll go all the way back down and kind of test this channel, this long-term channel that goes really all the way back to 2008. It's a channel that I have been tracking for a long time. Now, I know a lot of people say, can you really think we can go all the way back down to that channel? And, listen, I don't know. I don't know where things will go. That's another thing. Nobody knows where things are going. This is just a potential roadmap. It wouldn't shock me to see us pull all the way back down there. And so why do I say it wouldn't shock me? Well, number one, after doing this for 25 years, nothing really shocks me anymore. But, I just kind of feel like over the last 3 to 4 months, markets were priced for perfection. And I think we just live in a very imperfect world. And I think as we move forward in time towards the election, towards the end of the year, we get more Fed meetings, we get more developments in the Middle East, we get more developments with the BRICS, we get more developments in China. I think we get more developments with the Bank of Japan and what they're doing with the yen. I think as we move forward in time, we get more clarity and more realization that this is not a perfect world. And in fact, it's a very imperfect world. And that's the type of stuff that could cause a very hard pullback. Not to mention the fact that just, we went so far to the upside, pendulums tend to swing back and forth. And so it wouldn't shock me if we swang back the other way. Now, I sent this out yesterday morning, or last night, Friday night, and then I sent it out again Saturday morning. And this is really kind of a tongue-in-cheek chart. And of course, people love to see, chart porn and bear porn, for lack of better terms. And basically what I said was one gap closed and there's only 4 to go, right? And there's this theory, or there's a superstition, whatever you want to call it, is that when a market gaps up and it leaves a gap between one day's close and the next day's open, that eventually markets will go back and they will close that gap before resuming higher. Now we closed one of them on Friday. I think it'd be pretty easy to go back down and close the next one. But the 3 below that starts to get pretty severe. That would entail a lot of risk off, a very high VIX, and a lot of uncertainty. But I don't rule that out. Again, this is not a prediction. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I can't rule it out. And this is something that I look at. And so, we'll see whether or not that develops or not. But that is something that, it's just out there. Maybe that's another thing that you can kind of put in your tool chest and look at and say, okay, where are and you can do this on a weekly basis. You can do this on a monthly basis. And I know that there's some people out there that say, well, Brent, there's some gaps that are open all the way back in 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe. Are those going to get closed as well? And, listen, who knows? Maybe these won't even get closed. I'm just saying this is something that some people really believe in, and maybe it's something that you want to add to your arsenal or your checklist as well. But the other thing, what I really wanted to talk about this week, actually, let me take a step back. I had a couple of people ask me, do I think we're going to have more downside, or where do I think markets are headed over the next couple of weeks? And listen, to be clear, I do think we're going to have a lot more volatility over the next couple of weeks. I don't think we found a bottom on Friday. I do think we're going to go back down and at least test this next gap where we were at the beginning of August. I think it's very likely we at least get there. I think it's very possible we go through there. I don't think we go to these lower gaps in the next 2 weeks. I think that would be something that would potentially happen later in the year, depending on what's going on, again, with the election and the overall markets and the world in general. But I'm not expecting to go down and take out all these gaps in the next 2 weeks. I do very much believe that we will at least test or take out that second gap below, which is where we were, kind of in the April timeframe and in the August timeframe. Now, what I really want to talk about this week, though, is it really kind of started on Twitter, as many things with me do, but it really got me thinking. And you will often see me make the comment, people are losing their minds, and I think as we go forward in time and things start to get more stressful, you're going to see more of this. And I one of the things that I like to think that we've done on this channel is try to help people see through the madness, look at things clearly, look at things calmly and rationally. And I think if you can do that, you're going to have a leg up on just about everybody else. But what started this week is I sent out a tweet, and did I make a slide of? Oh yeah, I sent out this tweet, and I basically said, you got to keep your head, and nobody is in control. I think there's a lot of people out there They like to blame all of their problems or everything that's going wrong on some nefarious organization or some boogeyman out there, whether it's the Fed or whether it's the government or whether it's the capitalists or maybe it's the communist, or Putin or the Jews or the Vatican or the Illuminati, the people, the puppeteers that are up there pulling the strings. And here's the thing. I'm not denying that these, different organizations exist. I'm not denying that they certainly would love to control, certain parts of the population, if not the entire population. But I do not believe that they have full control. And I don't think you should believe that they have full control either. I would certainly admit that they're trying to get control and they will use their power in order to exert their influence and control. But they don't have control. And if they did have control, and if you do believe they have control, then you might as well just give up now, right? Because if they are all powerful and you can't do anything to counteract what they're doing, then you might as well not even get out of bed in the morning, right? But I actually believe we're going into a time period where a number of these different factions or organizations or countries or governments, however you want to define it, they're wrestling for control. And in many ways, they're losing control. And that's why you're seeing new programs put in place. They're doing everything they can to maintain the control that they have and perhaps even get more control than they currently have. But nobody is in control. There's not one group sitting in a smoky room, smoking cigars, laughing about the fate of the world, pushing a button and, manipulating every part of society and every price of a security. And I think once you realize that nobody's in control, then you realize that for some people, I think that's very scary, right? I think a lot of people come up with these theories because they would rather believe that something is in control than the idea that nobody's in control. But here's the thing, when there's a lack of control, then there has the potential to be chaos. And chaos is actually an advantage. If you can keep your head when everybody else is losing theirs, that's opportunity. And I think in the years ahead, we're going to have opportunities where other people are losing their minds. And if you can keep yours, you're going to have a great opportunity to get through this and perhaps take a step up that ladder. Now, whether that ladder is socioeconomic, whether it's just personal, whether it's something to do with your family or a business or your personal growth story, whatever it is, this isn't just finance related, just in general. If you can keep your head when everybody else is losing theirs, that gives you an advantage over them. And so while some people may be very afraid of what's coming, other people are very excited about what's coming. Now, perhaps you need to be a little bit of both, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't be scared. And, being scared and having a healthy dose of fear is what has, allowed man to survive for thousands of years. Having a fear instinct is not necessarily a bad thing, but my point is you can't let it paralyze you. You have to see the world for what it is. You have to understand that nobody's in total control. And then that allows you to take advantage of a situation when you see it. I tweeted this out kind of along the same lines and I think this is really, really important. And I'll be very honest. I've struggled with this myself in the past, and somebody kind of called me out on it 7 or 8 years ago. And I realized that they were right. And listen, you can believe that we are headed for trouble and you can believe that things are going to get tough. I think that's a very realistic scenario, but I don't think you need to be a negative person. I think you can still be a positive. I think you can know that stuff is happening and still be an optimist, because I think negative thinking, if you get in a habit of negative thinking and you're always scared of everything and nothing can possibly work out, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas, if you learn to kind of, face your fears and see those fears as an opportunity, either for personal growth or business growth or financial growth or whatever it is, then it actually gets pretty exciting. And you can actually look forward to what's coming. There's a famous, I don't know what the right way to say it is, There's a movie arc that's very famous, and it's called The Man in the Hole story. And basically, somebody starts off, their life is pretty good, and it's kind of going in the direction that they want. And then they have some unfortunate circumstance that sends them down, the rabbit hole into the valley of despair, and it doesn't look like they're ever going to get out of it. And then somehow they clutch and they scratch and they claw and they work and they climb and they fall and then they get back up again and they keep climbing. Eventually they get out of the valley, and then they're standing on top of the mountain. It's a beautiful day and they succeed, right? And that's them overcoming the challenge. And here's the thing: is that movie will win an Oscar. That's what you want to go see, because there's drama, there's heartache, there's pain, there's suffering, but there's also joy and happiness and the thrill of success. And that's the stories like Rocky or Gladiator or whatever it is, right? But if somebody starts off at the beginning of the story and all they do is succeed, it gets kind of boring. There's not much exciting there, right? And so I think having the right mindset is probably as important as anything else over the next couple of years. You guys have heard me say many times that, find a network of people that you can both lean on, disagree with, argue with, talk to, but that you can remain friends with. Because I think the personal and the social network that you build is probably going to be as important as any finance skills that you develop. And I think your mindset is a huge part of that. But the other thing is, I was interacting with it, and you can go back and you can look on Twitter and you can see the different people that I was interacting with. I want to be clear. I am not saying that there's not evil forces out there. I'm not saying that there aren't people trying to do you harm. I'm not trying to say that, the governments have every, are these benign and, altruistic organizations that are trying to help you. I'm not saying, and I'm not, blind to the fact that in many ways, the citizens are at war with their governments or at war with their, some of their own neighbors. But even though that's the case, I think it's very detrimental to you to believe that there is one overarching power that has a control over everything. And as a result, there's nothing that you can do to overcome it. And in fact, I think in many ways, these different groups, they're fighting amongst themselves, trying to get power. And so, but the mindset to which you approach the day, you can either have this mindset of a victim where everything that happens is bad and there's nothing that you can do. And once you get into that mindset, it's really, really hard to get out of it. So I really think that's something that if you struggle with that, I think you need to put yourself in the story, right? You need to put yourself in the movie, and you have to be the hero of your own movie. Whatever is going on in your life, think of it as a movie, and you are the center of it. You're the star, right? And you have to be the hero of your own movie. But you can't be a hero if you don't have any hard times. Heroes, again, if everything's easy, you're no hero. You're just gliding along, having a good day. But to be a hero, you have to face some fears. You have to face some challenges. You have to get over them. And I think that's really important, that's the way you look at things. This isn't to say that you can't. And listen, I think of myself as the hero of my own story. I don't mind saying that. Now, if you think that makes me have an ego or it makes me arrogant or cocky or whatever it is, that's fine. I don't think of it that way. I just think of it as having a positive mindset and thinking that no matter what comes my way, I can figure out a way through it. And I think I think in order to succeed, you have to have that mindset. And so I encourage you, if you don't already have that mindset, then to adopt that mindset. Because again, chaos, if chaos, and maybe chaos won't come. Maybe all of this stuff about, we're going to have this crisis or the government's, going to break down or we're going to go to war. Maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe things will, calm down in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We'll all be fine. And if so, that would be a great thing. But if that's not the case, and if we do go into hard times provide opportunities. That is the chaos, right? And there's that famous line from Game of Thrones, where the Littlefinger's talking about, or what Varys is talking about. If you don't have good leadership, then you got chaos, and it's a pit of despair. And Littlefinger says, chaos is not a pit of despair. Chaos is a ladder. Chaos allows you to climb the rung one more higher, while everybody else is fighting amongst themselves. So I think it's really important that you have kind of that mindset. And I know I kind of went on a little bit of a rant there, but I really believe in that. I think it's very important that you have that mindset as you face the world, and as you look through your portfolio and figure out how to manage the risk and the reward and all of that kind of stuff. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about this week was the macro alchemist a little bit. I think you guys know that we started a research service, and it's not a research service that's giving people stock picks. We're not saying, hey, put on this trade because we think over the next 16 days, There's a lot of those services out there. There's a lot of those kind of newsletters that are out there. That's not us. But what we do, we try to do some longer think pieces on big themes that we think, that will develop in the years ahead. We do some historical stuff. We took a look at, presidential assassinations and presidential assassination attempts, how that affects markets. We took a look at the Chinese real estate market and how that could be a domino effect to other real estate markets. But as a little bit of a lighter side of that as well, we send out a part of that same service. We send out every couple of weeks. We send out a thing called Think, Laugh, Cry. And Think, Laugh, Cry is based on a speech that Jim Valvano was a very famous basketball coach back in the 80s and 90s. He took his team from North Carolina State to the Final Four, and they won it, and they were a huge underdog. Nobody thought they should even be there, and they ended up winning the national championship. Like literally a fairy tale story. Fast forward a couple decades, and he gets cancer, and he ends up passing away from cancer. But before he passes away, he gives this very memorable speech at the ESPN Awards, and the genesis of it was, the tagline was "Don't give up, don't ever give up," and you probably hear me say that sometimes. But the heart of the speech, he said, cancer can take away my body and my ability to function, but they can't take away my mind. And he said there's three things he thought that you should do every day. And he says, if you think and you laugh and you cry every day, then that's going to be one heck of a day. And so that's the genesis of this. And so every couple of weeks we send out a thing where we give you something to think about. We give you something to hopefully make you laugh. And then we also give you something that has either made me cry or that I think is very emotional, or that I think, kind of tears at the heartstrings a little bit. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is we sent one out yesterday. If you haven't already subscribed to this, I would encourage you to subscribe. You can go to macroalchemist.com and sign up. And then whenever we send out a report, it gets emailed to you. But we sent one out yesterday. And the think part of it was, the Berlin Wall. And, I was a kid. I was in high school when the Berlin Wall came down. And, I'll never forget when it happened. It was all over the news. And there was this great, and I was a kid of the Cold War, right? I remember growing up thinking that, at any minute the Russians could invade and you had to be ready for the nuclear bombs. And, I remember watching Red Dawn, where the Russians, came in and took over America. They came over the North Pole through Canada. And, the Russians were the big bad guys. And, they were thought of as, one of the global superpowers. And then as we went along in time, we started to realize that, maybe they weren't quite as strong as we thought they were. And then ultimately, the Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union was kind of dissolved. And the thought at the time was that this was going to usher in a new period of democracy, free markets, libertarian styled thinking, the rights of the individual, because for many years and decades behind the Iron Curtain, individuals didn't have as many rights and individual liberties as we had in the West. And they weren't seen as democratic, and they had socialist economic policies, and so the idea, but then when that happened, we thought that kind of the Western way would kind of take over, and that the Soviet style would kind of melt away into the past. But is that really what happened or not? Because since that time, we've seen many parts of the West become more socialist. We've seen many of the parts of the West become more authoritarian. In other words, I'm not sure that the fall of the Berlin Wall ushered in a time of prosperity, capitalism, and economic growth, and libertarian or civil liberties throughout the world. And in fact, it almost feels like it's the opposite. And I think I could make a fairly decent argument that liberty wasn't released, but socialism was unleashed on the world and went the other way. Instead of Western values going east, it's almost like Eastern values went west. Anyway, I don't claim to have all the answers with regard to that, but if you think that that's an interesting topic to think about, I would encourage you to, sign up for the letter, read it. And if you have comments, let me know. I'd love to hear what people think about this. And, would love to interact on this. So that's really kind of all I had for this week. I know I was kind of a little bit on a soapbox, and maybe that's not what you guys were expecting, but I think I just think this is really important. I think we're getting we've talked a long time to be ready. And we're kind of getting to the point where we may need to be ready. Again, I hope we don't. I'll be happy to be wrong on this, but I think the biggest part of being ready is having a clear head, being able to think calmly, being able to think smoothly while everybody else is freaking out. And I think you have to, even if you think that there are evil entities out there looking to do your harm, I would strongly encourage you not to believe that they have full control, because if they have full control, that means you don't have any control. And, I don't think you can go through life being successful if you don't have control of your own destiny. So anyway, that's the soapbox for this week. I hope I didn't go on too long. I hope you guys all have a great week. I think the next couple of weeks are going to be extremely exciting. So be careful, look for opportunities, and we'll talk to you again in a week. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye-bye.